It's connected,
Yeah,
Nick. It is connected. Media.
are we
That's what I'm
connected?
looking for. Is media. Media. We have the media. Do we still
Are we
check if we're
live?
live? I mean,
Are
it
we
is.
live? So hard. It's so hard. But hang on, why don't I tell you now? I'll tell you quickly. If I go to the page, I'll go
Are you looking
to
to? We
the
shouldn't. We
LinkedIn.
are live. LinkedIn is yes, we are live. So we don't have
Oh,
to. When do we
oh,
stop actually staring at dashboards to see if we're live?
oh. Imagine if there was a thing, right?
Well, we need to trust the platform, I suppose.
Mm, Every
But
week.
do we?
Well, it's been 6 episodes. So I reckon we can start trusting it now.
But are we inclined to trust anything
No,
since
no, that's
you
not
know?
our day jobs. Our day jobs aren't around trusting. So why don't I
But
start with hi, Al?
good afternoon, welcome. Hi, Nick. Friday, the 17th of July, coming
Happy
to you
Friday.
much later than anticipated, like a Formula One Grand Prix when the rain stops, the 2 p.m. Kickoff. For, I think it's 3 p.m. now for most people, right?
Mm.
That's where we're at. Hmm.
I think we're going to be ready for a whirlwind episode, but not before, Al, not before you roll the jingle.
Oh, welcome to SCI-Fridays, where firewalls are feelings. I'm getting used to saying this. VPNs are vibes, and inside the network, I can actually do this. It's just a comforting lie we tell
Oh,
ourselves.
it's Freddie
This
Mercury.
in the news. Um, this is a show where we take a blunt, slightly cynical look at security compliance and identity in the real world, where tools are expensive, configs are messy, and attackers mostly just log in rather than break in. Welcome, Nick. It's great to be back.
Happy Friday to you, Al. It's always good presenting to you on a Friday afternoon. You know, I don't do lunch anymore on Fridays. I now do SCI Fridays because it fills the gap in my soul for what lunch should have been.
That do we want this look, Nick? Do we want this one, right? We're trying the different things. I'm going to put that down. Okay, yes, thank you, Nick, and welcome everyone. We are attempting to deliver another episode. We are constrained by time, so this one's going to be quick, but I think we should take a moment. Congratulations, Mr. Blank, on becoming a graybeard.
And congratulations to you for being renewed. In the news, Alistair and I were both renewed as MVPs and dual MVPs. Well, this is probably the only time we'll brag about this.
Pew,
So
pew,
Alistair is
pew, pew.
both M365 and security, particularly in the identity category. And I'm M365 and Azure infrastructure. So good on you, Al, for renewal.
We've been able to maintain the status quo, right? I think that's really um, where I'm at. And we'll just bring up the
It's a beautiful
slides.
scenery, but
Beautiful
I reckon you
scenery.
probably want that to be slides. Ah, there we go. It's
Yeah.
pretty.
So yes, we are officially still MVPs, right? Um,
Still,
that's the
it's very
easiest
good.
way. We still MVPs and we still dual MVPs. I think
Mm, mm,
that's the part that matters, right?
mm, mm, mm. Talks
So
about
thanks
our
everyone for joining.
integration.
Hey, what?
Go on. Well, I was
What?
going to say it makes a point that we are able to talk about the integration story. It's not just a singular vertical, but you talk about our identity and SharePoint, not just the SharePointy thing. So let's go ahead and greet the folks, Al.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. This is episode 6. This is episode 6, and what season are we in? Season 3, EP6.
Tres.
Yes, so this is season 3, episode 6. If you head over to the YouTube channel, you'll be able to catch up on the previous seasons. I think we had a good run in season 1. Season 2 was short-lived, and we are straight into season 3. And in episode 6, following on from episode 5, because we go in chronological order, we are actually going to be talking about what does SOC have to do with it, right? And why a Security Operations Center is actually important. Not just because you've deployed one, but because you stare at dashboards. So that's the main topic today. So let's have a look at what we or you will be watching today. Number one, as always, we've got some in the news items that we want to talk about. And funnily enough, one of them is actually the follow on of, I think, last week's topic of conversation.
Last week, yes.
Yeah. We're going to talk about why telemetry is survival. Vitally important that you understand that those dashboards that show you little signals are important for you to worry about. You know, where those signals are actually coming from. And then next top tip of the week, one practical move to go do things as soon as you get off the school. We recommend that as soon as you leave watching this video, or if you are catching us live, this is what you need to do immediately. And when Nick delivers that, you can actually jump off this live stream and go do that. That's how important whatever Nick says is to the population of the planet. Oh, the news. Some interesting things. They came for the watchtower. It's
You
like
can't
a
say it
movie.
like that. You need a bit of drama on that. They came for the watchtower.
They no,
No, that's not in the news. I need a bit of drama.
no,
Maybe
no,
some
no,
dramatic.
no. I can't do a Richard Attenborough. Is it David Attenborough, not Richard Attenborough? They came for the watchtower.
That's very good.
I don't know if I can do it that well, but yes, some interesting news. And weirdly enough, I deployed Postgres into my lab over the last couple of days. So I'm not sure if I need to worry about this, Nick.
Let's talk about it for a second. Where does the name come from? It comes from the Watchtower Labs, TOWR, and they coined the phrase, they came for the Watchtower when they released this particular deep dive on how to exploit this. And what's frightening about this is, obviously, it's Splunk, right? So, what do we do with Splunk? Well, Splunk itself is a security platform that we use for investigation, log analytics, etc. And they shipped an unauthenticated, free like beer, remote code execution. And that meant that there was a near perfect 9.8 CVSS. That's 9.8 out of 10. So critical security flaw in versions of Splunk Enterprise. And it's all around the newly introduced Postgres SQL sidecar service. So that was meant to manage internal background data, but actually opened the wide hole of missing authentication. Zero internal authentication controls. It blindly trusted that any user or system was already authorized. The irony of the irony.
That is bizarre, right? It sounds like, drawing a $14 million Pokemon card from a pack, right? It's rated at 9.8 on the Richter scale of
That's
coolness.
very good.
And it is bizarre that a platform like Splunk,
One
no
thinks,
one,
right?
no one is exempt of the tyranny that is hacking, right? Nobody is exempt from this. It is fascinating, the fact that it's been identified, and the problem is there are certain things that we need to worry about, right? The fact that they're saying that federal systems need to be patched. Uh, I wonder how many people out there or SOC analysts ran around in a frenzy trying to
Oh
patch the
yeah,
servers that came up. All
it
right,
gets
moving
better
on.
though. It gets better. Let's do the next one. So that we don't get an 18 rating on this show, particularly by YouTube. I think LinkedIn is pretty adult though. Well, it's meant to be safe for fabrics. What you're seeing on this slide is a defense evasion technique used by GOD DAM. See, I didn't say it. Ransomware, and they actually are a direct evolution of the beast and monster ransomware, pretty random that, lineages. You can't make this stuff up. So originally developed by a threat actor who's been tracked under Hyadina. Again, these names is like, I feel like I'm on Amazon Prime. I'm scrolling through my fantasy feed. And effectively, this is pretty serious, Al. We have a malicious kernel level driver called Poison X. So think about bring your own vulnerable driver, and effectively it abuses the code signing infrastructure carrying a legitimate, valid Microsoft code signing certificate as a kernel driver. If you think about the ramifications, effectively the OS is blind. Once that driver is loaded with kernel level privileges, think rootkit, but worse, the highest privilege level in Windows. It actually uses undocumented interfaces and it bypasses user mode integrity checks. It targets, directly terminates EDR. What you going to do? It's in, you can't see it. This is pretty serious, Al.
I wonder how much of the research to find this was driven by AI.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's exactly what you, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in terms of the amount of patching. And I think even the next slide talks about that if we want to go there.
Mm. Oh.
There is so much to patch, so little to see. And what we have seen actually this week is the flood of patches coming towards Windows users, which is actually a good thing. And a lot of this was done by using AI to find and fix. So I don't want to take any of the thunder away, though, about that
Mm.
SharePoint thing that we talked about last week.
Uh, and that's always the question. And Nick, I think our predictions on our other show back in 2025 was that AI was going to drive a lot
Mm,
of how things get discovered through unregulated and unsanctioned and irresponsible AI platforms like WormGPT and GhostGPT. And I think this is a perfect example of I don't know if the telemetry data is available today where you'll be able to see this was engineered by AI or this was engineered
mm.
by a human. I'd
How
love to
could you
see the
tell?
stats,
How
because
could you tell?
I yeah, so maybe AI has a signature. I don't know. But
Mm.
it is an interesting time to be alive. Look at that. This is July's Patch Tuesday numbers, right? That's crazy.
Massive, 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 massive numbers. And I don't see those numbers having gone down. One of the biggies in there, 622 CVEs were fixed, right? And the AI volume of patching is not going to stop. Notably, also because we've got our AI driven exploitation packages, and two big ones in that were two 0-day vulnerabilities, one for ADFS and the other one for SharePoint. We talked about that last week.
Mm,
So, what's the catch? There's big numbers on this slide, right? Lots of numbers,
mm,
and there's a lot of reach across systems. But the even though the CVSS, so the severity scores, are relatively low, they're modest. It means that just standard severity metrics alone, just because of the number of bugs that are out there that could be chained together, the size of the CVE itself doesn't alert you what's actively being used against your network and what could be used, because the power that we have with AIL is that I can chain together many low-level attacks to perform an escalation of privilege attack or a remote code execution attack.
Yeah, agent to agent communication, everything that you could, if you could attach Hermes or your harness of choice to something like Worm GPT or Ghost GPT, sky's the limit. Sky is the limit. What worries me, Nick, what worries me is when we look at, and it's, as we slide into our main topic today, what SOC got to do with it, right? 622 CVEs, and it's the 17th of July. Yeah. How, number one, do you actually run through that? And let's say you've got half of that. You've got platform that has 300 CVs. That's got 300 exploits, and you need to patch, right? A, the downtime behind that. B, how much do you care? Is it a thing? When do you actually get to it? And are you actually suffering from dashboard fatigue, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because 14% of these attacks raise an alert, and 50, just more than half, are actually logged, right? As in, we have a problem, it's in the dashboard.
Mm, mm.
So,
At some stage, we just choose to blindly trust, right? So just on Windows, you've got 416 of this number of the 622. And consider that for a single operating system, on a patch Tuesday, 416 new patches coming towards you. Do you choose to look at each one of them and, as you should, understand what it's patching and why? Or do you at some stage just take your hands off and go, just patch it, and I trust that what Microsoft is doing is the right thing, because they've never shipped one badge patch, let alone multiple in a row, Microsoft Exchange,
yeah.
and have completely screwed the pooch for us as a customer who has to then live with the result or roll back. Imagine 416 patches coming towards you on a patch Tuesday. What does that do for you?
Well, that's the concern, right? Are we not overloaded? And speaking about being overloaded, right? Moving on to our main topic, what SOC got to do with it. And a lot of people don't seem to understand this, right? I mean, I've got my kids, the twins, right?
Mm,
They currently stare at dashboards, but A, do they know enough about what the information that comes through? Do they even know what it means? And B, do they have enough information or the right information, right?
mm,
So when we go back to the title, Big Brother is your SOC, right? And you need to live off the telemetry, right? A lot of people, like you said, just said, no, we'll just let it go through, right? I mean, we're
mm,
not going to trawl through everything. And at the same time, we talk to customers about, hi, your Sentinel costs are through the roof, and you are struggling with Sentinel costs. So here's a tool that will reduce the log shipping, or at least the log sizes, and you only extract the data that you want.
mm,
So if we go back to saying, well, every action leaves a trace, but how much of that do you actually collect, and how much of
mm,
that do you actually care about, right? Because you've got to turn that collection of data into an action, or at
mm,
least into some form of notification that says, hey, I need to worry about something, and I want to be able to detect what's going on. So for me, it's, have you built the right detection? Number one, right? So what are you looking for? And then, do you actually know how to act on that? Because
mm,
the telemetry data is really all about survival. And the reason why you would have a security operations center in your building, or at least paying someone to worry about the security operations center, is because the telemetry data that we get in, someone's logged in, that's a
mm,
signal, right? It's
mm,
telemetry.
mm,
Where did they log in from? Oversimplification, right? But that's the easiest way to describe that, right? And you need to decide, as a theme architect, I don't know if that's an actual term, someone that's actually designed the system, that because the systems need to be not built, but you know, for lack of a better word, designed.
Mhm.
Are you collecting the right data? And can you catch a nefarious character coming through? I mean, it's it's a simple thing, right? It's not rocket science. Comments, concerns, Nick?
I think there's a lot to talk about here, and we have so much depth to this. I reckon, why don't we just, even though it's a Friday, let's make it real and just talk about really quickly what is it on identity, endpoint, remote access. Let's just talk about really quickly what's weird, right? Because to Alice's point, you've got a signal, you've got telemetry, but what's the right signal to look for? And when you start monitoring, you're going to get a lot. Your signal to noise ratio is going to be more noise than signal, but even immediately you can look for what's weird. So identity, look at your Entra ID protection and sign-in logs, possible travel, anonymous MFA prompts, or
Mm,
just a change in user agent string, right? Nice,
mm,
nice one. So consider user agent string changes from what you would expect with an app and a token to, say, a browser and a token. You think, that's not good. Talking about remote access, either VPN or zero trust network access, if we look at interglobal secure access as a private or internet access mechanism, then you want to look at sensitive internal resources that are being accessed from an unmanaged device, where previously it was managed, so the blip in the log, or a nod to identity, unexpected locations. And lastly, from an endpoint point of view, we're exposed so much, such a rich data source. If we're using something like Microsoft Defender for endpoints or MDE, then there's a lot that you can look for. Some of it, for example, the LSASS dumping is very explicit that something dodgy is going on because you never dump something that's deep in the kernel. Strange PowerShell, is PowerShell being called from Notepad, right? So something Notepad is launched in the context of administrator, and then from Notepad you launch PowerShell. That's dodgy. Or suddenly your local security controls disappear. You want to know about that kind of thing.
And if we go back one slide, we want to give you practical things to do when you leave, right?
Mm.
So when we look at the practical things, you don't have to boil the ocean. Yes, the news article, you got to patch it, right? 400 things to patch on a Windows machine. I don't know if that was server or desktop. Doesn't matter. You still
It
have to
doesn't matter.
patch
If
it.
that's just Windows, there's a lot.
Yeah. So for us, and where's my machine? Sorry, noise. So much noise. Okay, let's don't make that noise. All right. So it's still making a noise. How do I mute this? Mute, 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 mute. Okay, mute. Sorry, that was the Teams notification. But when we look at this oversimplification of this,
Mm,
is to start with just one thing: understand signing logs, right?
mm,
Now, from a tooling perspective, if we wanted to unpack what that was, right, before we get into everything that Nick just said now around, hey, there's this platform called Defender, and it does XDR things, and it will monitor stuff on endpoints. Start with just understanding where that user is coming from,
mm,
right? Before you go look at, oh, someone launched notepad.exe, but in fact, it's not notepad.exe, right? It's another tool. Someone managed to
mm,
get environment identity, ran some scripts like curl to go fetch things from an unknown repo,
mm.
and it was deployed. And that executable that is now sitting in some program files, but files is spelt differently. The
Yeah.
I is capital, or it looks like an I, but it's not. And notepad.exe is in that, and they run it, but it's not notepad.exe, right? So things like that you need to take into consideration. But start at the beginning. Start with a signal, right? Where's this user coming from? Can we verify that it's important, right? And why we want to do that is
Mm.
because we want to be able to baseline
Critical.
activity. right? Literally, that's all we want to do. We want to baseline activity. Nick, do you think that baselining activity would lead to trust?
It leads to the definition of what's normal. And let's just use trust very loosely, like a parent trusts their teenager, L. As long as you can see them, you trust that you can know what they're doing. As soon as they leave your vision, you no longer trust what they are doing, which is why when things go quiet, you investigate. So trust here is very much based on how much signal, how much noise, and of course the quality of the signal.
Trusting kids, right? If there are any parents that watch the show, you'll know exactly what we mean when we say, as they become older, specifically when they hit 18 and now they can go anywhere because they magically got a driver's license, how much do we trust them, right? I don't know how my parents got through. I mean, I was very untrustworthy. I came home at the right time, but what I was doing when I left the house, very different thing. So
You needed a
they would
sensor on
baseline,
you.
yeah, they'd baseline me, right? I go out on a
Yes.
Friday night. I leave at about 10:30. I'm home by 4 a.m. or just after 4 a.m. My mother expected me to come home, and on a Sunday morning, because I went out the Saturday night as well, she'd know I'd be drinking because she could smell the beer.
Mm.
And that's a known baseline, right? My mother knew that I wasn't driving, I was with someone else. So it's okay. If I was driving and I smelled like beer, oh, fire, right?
Yes.
Literal
Yes.
fire, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm deviating from the norm, right? And in very much the same way we treat our kids. If you're going to drive, you can't drink. That's a baseline, right? And we need to apply similar baselines to how we actually understand the telemetry, or at least the signals. And if that deviates from the norm or the baseline, we need to do something about that.
I reckon we can move on to considering this theme. So, what we've got is the centralization of the critical things. And we talked about identity, talked about endpoint, we talked about remote access, and consider that we want to land some high value disciplines and we want to figure out what's normal. Now, over the years, you have heard Al and I talk about identity as effectively the primary bastion for intrusion.
Mm,
So
mm,
once you have an idea of what's normal in identity land, then you can move over to what's normal from a device point of view, and of course, what's happening from a networking point of view. As Al said earlier, we don't want to boil the ocean. We do want to start somewhere. And this show is about how do we practically start somewhere. So we would suggest that you switch on those three vendors, or even just two, if we do nothing else: identity and device, and establish the normal
mm.
and understand how people are getting in, so remote access, how are they logging in, identity, and what's normal on the endpoint.
And we are doing good for time, Nick. We've got 5 minutes left of this week's shortened show. Your top tip, Nick, your top tip.
It goes on from what we were talking about earlier, and effectively the theme of everything that we've been tending towards. So we want to actually collect identity, endpoint, remote access logs, the stuff, the telemetry, and we want to switch that on. Now, we don't want to boil the ocean, but we want to start with three, and then we want to understand what's normal, as we've been talking about. And then what we also want to do is figure out what is not normal. So I suggest that you fire up a VPN, log in from Eastern Australia if you are normally logging in from South Africa, and see that the event actually does fire. So we don't want to log everything. Top tip of the week. We want to
Mm.
start somewhere, start practical, understand what's normal is, and even test that your platform knows what's normal is. And understand that you have the basics of a platform that you can use on a Monday morning without boiling the ocean. And as with everything else that we have said on this season, you start somewhere and you incrementally implement an empirical approach where you have something, you build on it, become better.
Look, to round off today, you got to start somewhere, right? And from a findings perspective for us, and Nick and I have been down this journey to such an end that we'd get network engineers to deploy something like Wazar, which is a free SIEM tool, and then just start ingesting logs so that you can see specific things that are coming through. Sign in. Impossible travel policy breached because someone went through a VPN through Australia and they just logged in from Cape Town 10 minutes ago. It's simple things. You are not beholden to spending big money on tools and then slowly getting into it. You can literally go and download Wazar today, stick it on a VM, and start ingesting logs and playing around with it if you don't have anything in your environment. If you do have something in your environment, go and check what sort of signals are coming through, right? Because it's vitally important that the signals are actually coming in. Because if the signals are not, EDR means nothing. The R in EDR means nothing. You're not detecting shit, so you're not going to do anything. You're not going to, there's no response, right, in EDR if you are not getting the right signals from that. And start small. Grab just identity signing, just signing logs. Start there, right? Start there. And a lot of these tools have already got baked in things. It makes it easy for you to not have to think about. Here's the top, just Google top 10 OWASP anything, right? And start with the list of OWASP. I think OWASP has got stuff for identity. I know they have for AI as well. But, today, go to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, go look at their top 10. Go to OWASP rules and go look at their top 10. Take that, implement it inside of your SIEM. If you don't have one, deploy Wazar so that you can start testing these things. Or go to your security operations center team and say to them, I want this information. And then, Nick, and then what happens?
And then we made it to the top of the show, 1 minute away from 2:00. Well done, Al.
Wow. We do, for those that are watching, it's my fault. I spilled cinnamon juice from a pancake on my chair. It was very sticky, and I've never done that before. And I was cleaning my chair when Nick said, hey, we are 7 minutes late to broadcasting this show. So I do apologize to the listeners and the viewers for being tardy at showing up at the right time. But this does prove, Nick, that we could do 30-minute episodes. And I'm very glad about that.
Good job. Good job. And to
All
you,
right.
Al, and everyone who's listening, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thanks for sticking around this episode of SCI-Fridays. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You now officially know more about your environment than whenever signed off. We're covered by the firewall. Remember to link, like, subscribe. We broadcast between 1 and 2 p.m. every Friday. And please comment, even though we haven't checked the comments. I suppose by episode, whatever, we'll be able to check the comments. But it's been great watching everyone. Watch us back because we do check if you are logging in. And whoever logged in today, we're very, very grateful that you showed up. Nick, any closing thoughts before I hit the stop button?
We'll see you next week for week 7, where everything is fine until it isn't.
Is that the topic for next week?
That is the topic for next week, yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Catch you next Friday. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.